Hello, podcast listeners. Strap yourselves in. This episode of JJ Meets World, you're just going to love it. If you are interested in Pittsburgh, if you're interested in advertising, if you're interested in cab rides, don't worry. We've got it all covered right here in this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Joey, welcome to JJ Meets World. I'm always happy when another J enters the arena.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so let's start with this. You and I met at the Be on Fire Theater B event. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that night, I was just thinking about this the other day. That night has a weird, left like a weird taste in my mouth because it reminded me of summer camp a lot, and I only went to camp once. So I don't know why my nostalgia was burnt. Maybe it was because that there were s'mores being made and conversations were by firelight for a lot of it. But I thought that was such a cool, neat event, and I'm glad that Tucker could put us together.
Yeah, it was a great event. And what I really liked about it was the first community event. It was the first event that I did in the 5 months that I was in Fargo. And so it was like my first chance to meet people in the community and, try some of the food trucks and meet folks from Theater B. So yeah, that was a really cool night for me too.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I mean, you could have gone to like a Sky Zone, like a trampoline based event, and just got off on the wrong foot right away. Definitely,
or broken ankle.
So Joey, let's kind of introduce the JJ Meets World to you. So could you give us the elevator pitch of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Joey Scarillo. I work in advertising and I'm a podcast producer. And I was in Fargo for 5 months from the end of August until right before Christmas in 2021. My wife was teaching at Concordia College. So I was living downtown and, just kind of fully immersed myself in Fargo for a while and really just fell in love with it and started a podcast project where I was going around talking to folks who were sort of pillars in the community and just getting to know people from Fargo. And I really learned a lot. I think Fargo is super cool and just really enjoyed my time there.
Where did you come from before Fargo?
Right. So I live in New York City. I live in Brooklyn. I've lived in Queens, but I've been in New York for 10 years working in advertising. And before that, working in theater professionally. But I grew up in Pittsburgh. And so Pittsburgh is always going to be my hometown. I wear it very proudly, black and gold. But so Pittsburgh's a big piece of my personality, and because it's where I came from. But after 10 years, you're allowed to call yourself a New Yorker. So I'm a New Yorker.
Okay, let's go to Pittsburgh first, because to me, Pittsburgh is the gem in the crown that doesn't quite get shined the way it should be. Because I've been to Pittsburgh 6 times in my life, and it literally gets harder to leave every single time I go there. It is a perfect blend of big city, amazing food, culture that's out of this world, history, and sports. Like, it covers everything that you want in a city that I feel like is incredibly accessible.
Oh, absolutely. I always say, too, Pittsburgh got really cool after I left. Pittsburgh was always cool. But Yeah, it is really going through this renaissance of, music, art, culture, food, especially. Like Pittsburgh is just this awesome town. I love it so much. I love going back. And it's hard to it's hard to describe when it's where you're from, because it's all it's, for me, it's where I grew up. So I can't compare it to growing up anywhere else. But yeah, I just, being you're right. There is it is hard to leave. There's like this electricity in Pittsburgh that is really cool and hard to compare.
I ate my favorite cheeseburger in Pittsburgh at Burgatory. I don't know how far out that chain goes, but that was in Pittsburgh where I had my absolute favorite cheeseburger of all time. When I used to work in poker television, we would be in Pittsburgh a lot throughout the year. So I've spent logged a number of days and weeks in Pittsburgh. And, Pittsburgh, I think it's stressful to kind of drive around it in the same way it's for a Fargo boy to drive around Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, just because of how everything's designed. But you're right. Pittsburgh is a cool town and I miss it.
So what is it about the Pittsburgh Steelers that seems to make people passionate, but not complete and total douchebags? Because I've got 3 people I work with who are huge Steelers fans, right? Like, will constantly wear the colors, but it's not like they're a Raiders fan, right? Who tries to shove it in your face. I feel like Pittsburgh is like, listen, we're fine. Thank you very much. We're good to go. Would you like to know more about the team? That's great, but I'm not going to force it down your throat.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we've got this feeling of until the Patriots won their last Super Bowl, we had the most Super Bowls for a long time. And I just feel like there is this, it's almost generational. Like, I feel like I find people in different cities that will say, oh, my brother or my uncle or my dad was a huge Steelers fan back in the 70s. And so now I'm a Steelers fan. Or so my whole family is Steelers fans, even though we live in, wherever, not in Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, I think it's just, it's part of the city. It's just ingrained in the city to become a Steelers fan. And Pittsburgh's kind of a humble town. Like, we're not flashy. We're not showy. And so for us, we really, the Steelers, it's just, like I said, it's just ingrained. It's just who we are. And I think people in Pittsburgh are nice people. So, you might not get that same feeling from, say, a Raider or a Ravens fan, or even a Raiders fan about us. But I think to the neutral football fan, or, a fan of a team that isn't a rival, they would probably have nice things to say about us.
Is it offensive to refer to someone as a Yinzer?
No. It's not.
It isn't.
No.
Okay, good. Because a Pittsburgh Yinzer that's a term I learned when I was working out there.
Yeah, it's not offensive. I mean, I think it's kind of like how you say it. Like, if you put an expletive in front of it, then it's a little different. but you could call me a Yinzer and I'd be like, yeah, okay. I mean, there's a very specific accent that if to an untrained ear is very hard to master, but people say Yins and Downtown and Up Air and Red Up. Like, there are a lot of really distinct Pittsburghese, we call it. And sometimes people can hear it in my voice sometimes, especially when I'm home with my family. I'll say things that I never would say normally. Like, I would call a $100 bill a $100 bill, or 100. And it's like, why do I dip back into this whenever I'm home? It's very strange. And I can't say, when I'm in Pittsburgh, I cannot say the word soda. It just doesn't come out of my mouth. It's pop. And anywhere else, I'm I just try to assimilate, but my whole life it's been pop. So I don't know.
I got it. Okay. And I know at one point we'll move off of Pittsburgh, I promise, but I want to really, I want to juice this lime as much as possible. Okay. So Fargo has a really rich history as far as how it became a city and, how important the river and the railroad was and how it convened in one spot. And when I think of Pittsburgh, of course, the steel industry, the backbone of America, comes to my mind. When you're in elementary school, do you learn, like we learned a lot about like Lewis and Clark, right? That was a big thing since, North Dakota was such a huge part of their journey. And, did you learn a lot about the steel industry when you were in elementary school?
Yeah, we did. I remember going to the Heinz History Center, which is actually where I got married also. But it's this beautiful museum that has it's all about the history basically of Western Pennsylvania. And there we learned about, just different historical things in Pittsburgh. But yeah, I do remember learning specifically like Andrew Carnegie and the Mellons and the Fricks and like the families that built Pittsburgh, and learning about the steel and that whole like turn of the century era. Yeah.
I think about how many other like major cities owe some of their growth to Pittsburgh, right? So, Philadelphia, New York, who are all taking this amazing product that was coming out of Pittsburgh and using it to build buildings that people are like, it's going to be 20 stories tall. No, man was never meant to build buildings that tall. There's no way. And how rich of a history that is for the people around there. So, for example, here's one of the things I learned when I was in elementary school. Fargo used to be called Centralia back in the day, like right when it first was formed. And Fargo became known nationally for being able to do quickie divorces. And so the train would stop for 2 hours when it got to Fargo. And they'd put new water in the train. They'd load up new coal and everything like that. But people used that time to walk the 2 blocks from the train station to the courthouse and get a divorce. And people came from all over the country to get this quickie, easy divorce done. Nothing gets drug out. There's no paparazzi here, so it doesn't make page 6 in a newspaper. And Fargo put itself on the map for essentially what Vegas does now with weddings.
Wow. I mean, nobody can see me right now, but my jaw is on the floor. Like I never heard that while I was in Fargo. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, you didn't go to elementary school here, so you had no need to sit down and write a 5-page paper on exactly what Fargo means to you.
No, that's true, but I'm just surprised that nobody mentioned that. Like, it feels like elementary, knowledge of Fargo, and no one told me that. That's interesting.
You're also at kind of a disadvantage here, Joey, because JJ in a lot of circles is known as sort of the informal mayor of Fargo.
Okay.
Because he's just such a socialite. He's a socialite. Yeah. JJ, you are a Fargo socialite.
Well, I'm the great grandson of a mayor of this town. I have family on both sides who, had a thing. And I also have the distinct advantage of being someone who left and then came back and realized, like, listen, there's so much untapped potential we have right here. So, yeah, it's interesting. And also, being so close to Minnesota, we also had a unique relationship because at one point Minnesota lowered their legal drinking age to 18. And so if you're in Fargo and you're a high school student, you just would hop over across the Main Avenue Bridge and get blackout drunk in Minnesota. And then it was only like that for like 7 months. And the number of drunk driving accidents went through the roof. And so across the state of Minnesota, so they instantly repealed it. The problem was if you had already turned 18 by that point, they repealed it. You were grandfathered in.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, yeah. So for like an entire, for a 3-year span of a generation, they had, you would go over there. And so it became very party heavy.
I believe my mother was grandfathered in. I'll have to double check, but I remember her saying that she was like, yeah, I didn't have to deal with the whole waiting till 21 thing. Yeah, because she was just the right age.
My mom was, and so I think they're pretty close in age. So I think that would definitely. And my mom told stories too about how, so if you had friends who were 17, you could go get the beer and then bring it back over, right? And it just became. I think it's one of the reasons that we're so much smarter now when it comes to drinking, but we're not making better decisions about it across the board, because that's the other thing that Fargo's known for is we're binge drinkers in the state of North Dakota, and Fargo is no better than anybody else. And that's the black eye that we're really trying to deal with right now. So much so that in the show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, there's a character in an episode when they're on a plane who's wearing a University of North Dakota jacket. And they're talking about how there's no way they could outdrink that person from North Dakota. That's all they do there. They've got snow and then binge drinking. And I remember thinking like, hey, it's awesome. We're being featured on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but not for the reason I would suspect. Okay, so Joey, let's Pittsburgh. We're done. We're done talking about Pittsburgh. Let's get it out. Let's wash our mouths out and move on to the next subject. Let's talk about advertising, because that's an exciting field, and it's certainly a field that within the last 15 years has changed pretty drastically.
Yeah. So my entrance into advertising is very unconventional. So I came to New York to be a theater stage manager and was, in the union, and that was the plan, right? Went on tour for a year, came back, needed a day job. And I had a friend who was a copywriter at another agency. And he said, they're looking for somebody at the front desk of this company. And it's a small company. They're based in Richmond, Virginia, but they have a little New York office. You should apply. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to go in, day job, front desk, do that, and then be able to stage manage at night. So I got this job, and I actually did that for a while. I was sort of, moonlighting as a stage manager and, working in an office during the day. And then about a year goes by, and I decide, I'm not going to do, like, you guys know, right? In the theater, like, the holiday season is a big time to do a show. I decided I'm not going to do a holiday show this year. I'm just going to focus on advertising or just focus on this job. And so I did that and was really invested. Like, I really found myself like enjoying the work that I was seeing in the office. And so through, that time, I literally went from like front desk to like office manager to like an account assistant. And then a couple months later, I got the job that I'm at now as a project manager. And so it really felt like how to succeed in business without really trying. I don't know how I ended up here. When I came to New York 10 years ago, I thought I was going to be doing something completely different, but here we are. So, I'm a senior project manager, and I've worked on, a bunch of really cool accounts. I did one of my first spots that I project managed was for Preparation H. And we actually I didn't go to the shoot, but we shot a spot in a little town called Keister, Minnesota.
I love it.
It was brilliant.
Oh.
It was brilliant. And I mean, if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. It's really funny. And I was like, great, this is advertising. Like, I get to work on cool spots like this. So I worked on Preparation H and Robitussin for a little while, national parks, and the like JM Smucker's brand. So I did some stuff with Jif and Smucker's and Pillsbury. And then, and it was interesting, right? So at the office I was at, the Gillette account was like the account, right? It was like, had the most people, had a lot of great talent. They were making a lot of work. And I remember in that first year, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to work on Gillette. Like, those guys are just like always making cool stuff. And like, it's just really great. And about a year into working there, I got the opportunity to join the Gillette account. And it was so fast. It was fast and furious and super slow all at the same time. Like, there would be some things that were like, we need this done like yesterday. And then there would be some things that like we would work on that would take like a year. So it was just really fun working on that account. I'd worked on Gillette for 2 years. And then now I work on an account for a local hospital back in Pittsburgh, which so it like has come full circle. Yeah.
That's awesome. Was there ever a moment where, like someone from the page department runs in and is like, stop, everybody, stop. They're adding an extra blade to the razor. Stop, throw in all the old work.
No, but I did launch work on the launch for the razor that only has 2 blades for sensitive skin. That was fun. So that was interesting. I was like, oh, they took a blade away. But no, yeah. I mean, the craziest thing though too was I worked on the We Believe video that came out a couple years ago. That was sort of my last thing that I worked on Gillette, and it was interesting because that got a lot of. That was the best a man can get spot that told men not to be toxic, basically.
Yep.
And that got a lot of pushback, and I mean, it got a lot of love too. But the pushback from that was pretty prominent. So that was definitely an interesting one to be working on. But yeah,
I imagine a product line like Gillette too is going through an interesting time when facial hair is in a major flux for the first time in 100 years, where the 5 o'clock shadow is something that people are way okay with. And we're certainly seeing more beards than we've ever seen before. And Gillette fits in perfectly with the like 1950s clean shaven man of today, right? And stuff like that. And now you can be rugged, but you don't have to be mountain man rugged, right? Like there's a way that you can have that awesome beard, but keep it kept up. And Gillette's the best friend to help you with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you ever had to work on a product where you sit there and you like, I just can't think of anything. And then while you're taking the subway home, or you stop to get a hot dog at a cart, because that's what I imagine everyone in New York does on a daily basis, you suddenly hit that moment of like, oh, this is the lightning rod I needed.
Not with the advertising, right? So I don't, as the project manager, I'm, facilitating, but with the podcast that I work on, that has happened, right? Like I've been sort of hit with these moments of, this person would make a great guest, or, I'm on the subway now and I just know exactly how this script could come together. So I start like putting it frantically into my phone. Inspiration strikes whenever. But speaking of the hot dogs, this is funny. The first day that I moved to New York, I actually came in on a megabus because I didn't have much stuff with me yet. And as soon as I got off the bus, I got one of those hot dogs off the cart and I ate it. And I said, that is my first and last one. I've done it. I can cross that off the list. Never need to do that again. And I went on my merry way. Actually, I say I went on my merry way. What actually happened was I walked in the wrong direction. And so then I came back to the hot dog stand, and then I walked in the wrong direction again. And then I came back to the hot dog stand, and then I walked in the wrong direction again and came back to the hot dog stand. And then I realized you can only go the wrong direction 3 times. So
it sounds like that hot dog really disoriented
totally.
you.
When I went to Toronto to visit a friend the year after we all graduated, it was a friend of mine from high school. So it was the year after we had all graduated, and she was up there studying opera. And I was so excited for my trip to Toronto. And it was the first time I had ever encountered like a hot dog cart. And I was like, oh, hey, I gotta go try one of these cart dogs. And they're like, listen, you don't want a smog dog. And I was like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, no one eats the street meat up here. And I was like, oh, you've got so many awesome slang terms. And that makes me want to have it so much more. Full disclosure, I don't care for hot dogs to begin with. So I forced myself to eat something I wasn't going to enjoy anyway. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience. Yeah,
it's funny that's what they call street meat. We call street meat like the halal or those kind of carts, and those are really good. It's just the hot dogs in water. I don't know. It's just kind of grossed me out.
Years ago, my now brother-in-law and I were going to buy 2 hot dog carts, the same cart, and we were going to open up competing hot dog carts at either end of Broadway and only operate from like 10 o'clock to 3 a.m. every night during the school year. And we'd both buy the same product, store it in the same place, essentially like bring our carts to the same storage unit, but we would create this fake rivalry so that people would do the like promotion for us, be like, oh, you don't want to go to JJ's hot dogs? Those are the worst. Those are shit. You got to come down and you got to try Brady's Franks. Those are the ones. Those are the best in town, let me tell you. And then, those money mouths out there would do it. And then what we ended up not doing it full stop because at the time, Fargo really hadn't come to grips with the fact that like food trucks and food carts were something that they should give into. So there was this laundry list of things you had to do. And, they were like, you can't do this and you can't be here and like all over the place. And then luckily, a couple of really like guerrilla style hot dog vendors were like, you know what, I'm going to go out there. And if they want to kick me out of this area and piss off 50 drunk college students, they can deal with it on their end. And now look, now we got food carts galore. We got, the trucks and vans are everywhere and you can experience something fun. I think it's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I saw a lot of hot dog stands and carts throughout Fargo. That's why I was surprised when you said that they weren't very welcoming because, there's a whole area downtown where there's trucks that just stay there, right? Like they just hang out down there, right? By the other train station.
Yeah. Really, definitely downtown Fargo is a really interesting case of generational change in Fargo, because you have the old guard that's really like, well, no, this is and they're suspicious of anything, but really it was the next step in the revitalization of downtown. It started with getting some other businesses down there, and now having all the street food is fantastic. And I don't mean to anger anyone who works in downtown Fargo, but I prefer the food truck food because you get some fantastic kinds of food there.
Yeah. Now, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment though, because this is where you get the generational divide. There are a lot of people out there who took a risk to open a business in downtown Fargo that's brick and mortar that pays property tax that the food trucks do not pay.
Oh.
And so that's kind of where they're at right now, is saying like, well, if you want to operate a food truck and be parked right in front of, let's say like Vinyl Taco is actually paying to maintain the roadway that you're operating on. And so I don't know if they'll end up changing something and you'll have to pay like a food vendor's license every year that's equivalent to, okay, you've got 15 square feet of business, so you're going to pay us $25 a year to operate, or what that turns out to be. But I feel like the second that you do anything to inhibit the ability to offer those foods and to move around, they're going to go to West Fargo. They're going to go to Moorhead, like we're really great in Fargo Moorhead about taking something that's awesome and convincing them to go someplace else with it. So I hope it's not, because that Egyptian food truck is out of this world. It is so good. And Fargo's Phillies I enjoy. There's so much good stuff that it's to the point of where like elementary schools now are doing these little food truck, like, hey, it's Lincoln School Days. And then I will go over there and pretend I'm a parent just so that I can like be like, oh, it's not weird for me to be eating at your food truck and using this slide. Great, everybody.
I'm really hungry now.
Are you?
Yeah.
Joey, I don't know if you know this about Tucker, but he's pretty much the Fargo authority when it comes to cheesesteaks.
Oh.
Self-proclaimed, I guess.
Oh, I will gladly tell you, I'd print business cards. I'm that confident in your abilities.
I think I'm the only person in Fargo who, for a period of time, took it upon himself to make a 10-point rating scale of cheesesteaks and post on about it routinely on Facebook until it started affecting my health so much that I was like, I think I should step back from eating this many Philly cheesesteaks.
So who has the best one?
My favorite one in town is from Grand Junction. But the thing is that, so I've spent plenty of time in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I've eaten plenty of Philadelphia cheesesteaks. I love Philly cheesesteaks. And you don't get one in Fargo Fargo Moorhead like you get in Philly. There isn't a single one that recreates what you get in Philadelphia, which it seems silly to me because you just travel to Philadelphia once, eat at cheesesteak, at Geno's or Pat's or Tony Luke's or something like that, and you'll go, oh, this is how it should taste, because most people outside of Philadelphia, it seems, really think, oh, just take any beef, take ground chuck, and then put cheese on it and put bread there, and you've got a Philly cheesesteak. And well, no, you've got a cheesesteak. But a Philly cheesesteak is going to be thinly sliced ribeye, cooked at a low heat with onions and cheese whiz.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to get the bread right, and you got to do like these other things. And there's a flavor profile that comes from all the juices as you eat it. And no place in this area comes even close. Grand Junctions, however, just makes a really tasty a sandwich. It's the one that tastes the best out of all of them. So whenever I'm feeling a Philly cheesesteak in town, I go to Grand Junction, but I am waiting for the day that someone is really going to open up a storefront that gets it right. Most of the time you get ground chuck. It tastes like flavorless hamburger. And oftentimes people will put Swiss on it, which I think is silly. What are you putting Swiss on a Philly cheesesteak for? You want the zest of like an American cheese, or even if you're going to go milder, go provolone.
Yeah,
because people eat it with provolone all the time. But I typically when I'm in Philly, it's been a few years now, but I always get an American wit because I want that zestiness of the cheese. But oftentimes when I get a whiz wit, I get too much cheese, and then the cheese overpowers everything else. But when you're putting American cheese on it, you get a nice melt. It tastes a lot like the whiz, and then it combines perfectly with the meat juice.
That was very informative.
Yeah.
I would listen to that spin-off podcast. That
I've also gotten into arguments with people in town here. Because when I would order them, oftentimes on the menu, they'll say it comes with mushrooms and peppers. Now, I don't like mushrooms and peppers. Those are perfectly valid things to put on a cheesesteak. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't need those things, because that's not the base. The base cheesesteak, a classic cheesesteak, is a whiz wit, right? That's a cheese whiz with onions. That is a classic cheesesteak. And I would always try to aim for that if they had it. So I would say, and I have a number of times where either a person who works there or someone at my table, when I'd say, could I get it with no peppers and no mushrooms? And they say, that's not a Philly cheesesteak. And I'm like, oh, you want to go outside right now? I will fight you, because I have eaten so many cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I get defensive by it. And it's the kind of thing where, on paper, it is a simple sandwich, but oftentimes the simplest foods are very simple to get wrong as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, they always say a New York bagel you can only get in New York because it has something to do with the water. I mean, I feel like it's the same everywhere, right? Like,
yeah. When I shot a commercial with Tony Luke himself in Philadelphia, he looked into the camera and he said, if you're not in Philadelphia, it's not a Philly cheesesteak.
True.
It's just a cheesesteak. And that is one of the truest sentences I have ever recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a good cheesesteak out in the suburbs at my wife's parents' house. And we don't do mushrooms, but I do put peppers on. So I do like that little spice of the peppers.
It's definitely valid. I have no issues with whatever people want to add to the Philly cheesesteak. The hair would go up in the back of my head, and I'd get all hissy like a cat that's been backed into an alleyway when someone would accuse me of, well, that's not a real cheesesteak. And I'd be like, hey, check your privilege.
These are the things that keep Tucker and I's relationship spicy over all the years. Joey, okay, so you spent 5 months in Fargo. I'm curious to know from you, if someone asks you like, oh, hey, how was Fargo? Like, what are some of the like bullet points that you enjoyed about Fargo, or even the deficits that we are not fulfilling?
I mean, I would tell anybody to go at least spend a weekend in Fargo. I had a ton of fun. I think it's a really great. There were a lot of great surprises. And I think some of the big surprises for me, one, were how big of a college town it is. I didn't know that going in. And two, I mean, I knew it was a I read the same articles about how big of drinking is in North Dakota, but I didn't know how big the craft beer scene was in Fargo. And so that was really surprising and really cool. I really loved going to all the different breweries. And yeah, I mean, there's like an energy, right? Like what I like so much about it is that folks there don't just settle. It's not like, oh, we're Fargo, we're just gonna, just live life. Like you guys really want to make life awesome, right? Like the museums there are awesome. The art is awesome. The sense of community that I felt while I was there, I've never felt, even in New York or in Pittsburgh. Like the way you guys do the farmers market every weekend in the summer and into the fall, gorgeous. Like that was an amazing display of community that really, really impressed me.
One of the things I tell people all the time is that because the movie Fargo is clearly one of the biggest calling cards we've ever had, right? So when I go places and I introduce myself and I'm from Fargo, they're always like, "Oh, like the movie." And for a long time, I really, it made me cringe when people said that. And then I realized that it's not a bad thing that someone associates you with something that they bring back, because now you've got their attention and you can be like, yeah, it's a little different than the movie portrays us, but they also did get a lot of things right. I've always been surprised that we never leaned into that. Like at no point did we ever start like a national tourism campaign based off of the Fargo series. The biggest thing I think that we do is we've got the wood chipper at the visitor center so that you can, throw a fake leg in there and take a picture with it. But I think it's just a wonderful way to tell people about who we are. And then I agree with you that like a weekend is all we need. We can convince you that we are a place that deserves your attention in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And I think, to be quite honest, there are times where like if you went to go visit the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago, in 48 hours, you might not find that same feeling or energy that you get when you're in Fargo. A couple of years ago, I got into a fight with CNN, and it was because they sent one of their travel reporters out here, and she never left a 2-block radius. So here's the thing that is weird. Her article about Fargo gushed about it. She loved it. She's like telling everyone, you gotta go. But she only stayed in this one little chunk of downtown Fargo. And it used to drive me nuts because I'm like, it's great that people are going to come to the downtown area, but there's so much more we have to offer. Even a 15-minute drive outside of the city will get you a completely different experience. And I think that's one of our growing pains right now is that we think the only way to attract people to visit is to show off the fact that we're like, hey, we got a vibrant downtown scene, rather than saying, hey, we got a vibrant downtown scene. You could also join a pickup game of softball at one of our numerous softball fields. You have the opportunity to canoe and kayak on a river that flows all the way to Canada, and it flows north. There's a lot that I think we do a poor job messaging because we're so nervous that people are going to be like, oh, well, it's horse and buggy outhouse living in North Dakota if you venture outside of 2 square blocks.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed that people in Fargo, I mean, maybe in North Dakota and Minnesota, that part of the country, are very humble in general and don't want to really brag or even like talk up what you guys got going on. Like I was like, really, I felt like there were moments where I was like, no, this is really cool. Like we should talk more about this, or you should tell people about this because there's so much going on. Yeah.
If someone's going to visit New York and they're from Fargo, okay.
Uh-huh.
What do you think are some must-dos
to visit New York? Well, the first advice that I always give people when they come to New York for like a couple of days, is you probably need more than a weekend. You probably need 4 days at least to see a bunch of stuff. And then when you do that, like concentrate your time in one area. So if you want to see, I don't know, if you want to take the Staten Island ferry and go see the Statue of Liberty, do that the same day that you go see the 9/11 museum, right? Try to get all the things that you want to do in Lower Manhattan done on the same day. And then if you want to venture into Midtown and go see a show and maybe, I don't know, wait in line and go see Stephen Colbert, like do all of that in one day because you can do all of that in Midtown, right? And then if you want to venture out to Brooklyn or venture out to Queens or, you know, go see the Upper West Side, do all that in a day, but don't try to get from uptown to downtown and back to Midtown and then out to Brooklyn all in one day because you're going to spend most of your day traveling. So that's my New York travel advice. But what was the original question?
No, I mean, I think you hit it. And I wish that I would have gotten that advice the last time I went to New York because it was the first time I had gone where it was me and my buddy Phil Lund, who's been a guest on our program before, and we didn't have a schedule, right? The only thing we knew we were doing is we were going to go see a Paul Simon concert while we were there. And then I knew I was going to go see something on Broadway, you know, a couple of things, but we didn't have like a schedule during the day. And I will never forget, I have never felt so stupid, I guess, as we flagged down a cab and we got in it and we gave them the address for the firehouse where they filmed Ghostbusters because I wanted to go see that because they had just rehung the Ghostbusters logo outside of it. And the guy said, no way. I'm not going to drive all the way down there and I'm going to get caught in traffic on the way up. No. And he goes, where else do you want to go? And we kind of like panicked and you know, you don't have a direct answer for that, right? When you want to go someplace, someone's like, no way. And we go, well, we'll just get out here. And he goes, $5. And we hadn't gone anywhere, right? We hadn't left anywhere. And I was like, no. And so we get out. And this guy slow rolls down, like he rolls down his window and follows us for a block, yelling at us out of the driver's side window, blocking traffic behind him. And I remember being like, oh, this feels wrong. This feels like I'm a big tourist right now. I might as well just look up in the sky at the tall buildings at this point. And so we told our experience, and this is the true New York life, right? So we're telling our experience at like 3 a.m. as a bar is closing, and the bartender goes, fuck that guy. He goes, get in my car. And he had this beat up old car, and he took us down there.
That is super cool.
And also, like, I definitely probably shouldn't have gotten in the vehicle with this guy that I just met. And like, I was 3 sheets to the wind at that point. But it was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, you're right. We should see this. And we got down there and the sign was still glowing and it was a lovely moment. It's a moment I'll never forget.
I could be wrong about this, but I actually think it might be illegal for them not to take you where you want to go. Like you're paying that cab driver. Don't worry about his, I mean, I'm not saying don't worry about his feelings, but like, don't worry about him being stuck in traffic. That's his problem. I mean, look, I'm not trying to like come down on cab drivers, but
yeah, get ready for some hate mail.
Oh yeah, I'm already expecting it now. But like, I don't think that they're allowed to do that, and I think he was taking advantage of that. I mean, I've had cab drivers like and I do kind of feel bad about this, but not really. I mean, I got to get where I'm going. So when I lived in Queens, I lived very close to the airport, and you know, I hopped in the line for a cab and it's like an 8-minute drive. And the guy was like really disappointed when he got me and not going all the way back into the city because these guys have to wait in a really long line at LaGuardia to get a person when they're in the taxi line. So I did feel kind of bad about that. I don't think I've done a yellow cab. I don't think I did a yellow cab from the airport again after that. But the other thing is Ubers will take you anywhere and you know, they really won't complain because You know, it's
Yeah. Well,
if
they
it-
know
They
we-
can see
they-
where you're
yeah,
going before they
yeah,
pick you up.
exactly,
Right?
exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I was in Chicago visiting some friends during the era when Uber was just starting to take off, and it's like the cab drivers all went to like some secret meeting together where they were telling you about the horrors of Uber and how, you know, it was going to completely ruin, the ability to like flag down a cab, and how you're going to, you know, as soon as they get rid of the regular cab companies, you're going to pay this inflated price and da 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 da. And I think we've proven that there's an ecosystem where both can live and thrive at the same time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know all the details, but I'm pretty sure what ended up happening was the companies that own the cabs, or like at least the black cars, they have fleets of Ubers. So it's not, you can't just be, you know, JJ, I'm taking my Toyota Corolla out and I'm going to be an Uber driver. You have to be part of one of these fleets. And have a black, you know, like I think you have to have a specific car, and it is all, it's very structured. So the Ubers are actually relatively the same price as the yellow cabs, and they are more expensive than they would be, you know, to get from downtown to the Fargo airport by, like, you know, they're very expensive.
Have you ever spent any time in London?
I haven't. No.
So one of the unique things I found out, my sister and I went to London together. We did this amazing trip where we went to London, and then we went to Scotland and visited some friends who were studying abroad, and then met up with other friends who were studying abroad. And then my grandfather dated a woman who is 20 years his junior, who lived in Switzerland. And so we went and stayed with her as well. So I had this awesome European experience with my sister, of all people. And it turns out that we do not travel well together as siblings. And so since then, we haven't done any trips. But that's besides the point. What I'm getting at here is, to become a cab driver in London, you have to take a history test. And you need to pass it with flying colors, because London sees the people who run the cabs as sort of de facto tour guides for people. So you know, like a lot of the cab drivers speak more than one language, and a lot of the cab drivers, and that's one of the reasons it's so expensive to take a cab in London, is because you're not just riding with someone who's going to get you from point A to point B, but they're the type of people who can suggest like a museum that's coming up and what's going on with that. I was incredibly impressed with the cab service I received when I was in London. We only took a cab like twice the whole time we were there, right? But it was amazing. One of them is we went to their Museum of the Modern Image to see a Pixar exhibit. And on the way, the guy was telling us about the exhibit itself and giving us like some hot tips on things that we should try. And he goes, and you know, when you leave the museum, you should also like just, you know, take a quick 2-block walk, and you can go and check out this park and the historical perspective and significance of that park. And it was just, I was amazed by it. And I think when you get a good cab driver, it changes your experience for just that little bit. When I was 19 years old, I had a cousin who was getting married in Las Vegas, and my dad had cancer at the time. And so he and my mom chose not to go, but they said, if you and your sister want to go. And I was like, yeah, a 19 and 17-year-old will go to Vegas and we'll have a wonderful time. And so we go down there and we're with all of our family. But I tell my sister, we're going to go to a Second City show while we're down there. So I had to go pick up the tickets, and I get in this cab, and it's just me. And it's probably the first time I've ever ridden in a cab by myself in my entire life. And I recognize the instrumental music that's playing, and I lean forward and I go, excuse me, you know, what's playing? And so the cab driver goes into this giant monologue about how it's the score to the movie Titanic. And he used to be a drinker, and he was addicted to heroin, and he used to cuss all the time. And one day he looked in the mirror and he didn't like who he was. And so when he got in his cab, he put this CD in, and every year for the last 18 years, he's listened to the soundtrack to Titanic, and he's been a better person, and he's lived a better life. And he goes, this right here, this is where Rose exits the taxi, and she sees the enormity of the Titanic for the first time ever. And I, at that time, was like, hey, that's great. Get me out of this cab right now. I feel like you are going to invite me into some cult that I don't know about, and it's time for me. It's time for me to get out of your cab, sir. But
yeah, I find the best cabs are the best cab revs are when no one speaks.
Right.
Those are that's the
agreed.
best. Yeah.
I hate how like some modern, like modern taxi outfits are like, oh, we're going to add this television that's playing in the back all the time. And it's crappy ads and it's content that's only made to be brought into your mind every like 3 minutes at a time. It's the same thing as when I fill up my gas and the gas pump has got the television that starts up for just a little bit. I'm like, I would rather just enjoy a moment of silence, take in my surroundings a little bit, than to look over and be like, oh, Jennifer Beals is going to be in the next season of Star Wars. Okay, fantastic.
You turn that off right away. Yeah, I think there are certain cues in the city that people who live there, like a cab driver, will know if you live there or not. And I think one of them is if you turn that off right away. Like if that goes off in the first 10 seconds and you don't fumble around to figure out how to turn it off, like get in the cab, turn that off, and then like, okay, this guy like lives here, works here, does his thing. I think that's one of them. I had this really cool moment, speaking of like being from New York or, being a New Yorker. The first time I came back after being in Fargo, we came back for fall break, right? When Concordia was on fall break. And I get out of the cab and I've got like a suitcase with me and I do the like, cell phone, wallet, keys check to make sure, I got everything. And there's this woman sitting at a cafe with her dog outside. She's sitting alone and she like makes eye contact with me and she looks at me and she goes, "Do you got everything?" And I said, "Yeah, you just want to double check, make sure." And she just looks at me and she goes, "Welcome home." And it like, I was like, oh my God, just kind of crushed me. I don't know. Just was like, she just knew what I needed to hear in that moment after being away for so long. Yeah, it was cool. A guy had been out in New York for like 3 months or 4 months at that time. And she like nailed it right away. It was awesome.
We had a whole episode not too long ago about the trials, tribulations, and also fun of being at an airport and flying. So I'm someone, I find a lot of joy in flying because I'm a weird dude who likes two things. Number one, I love standing in a line. I find that like I can make friends with the people in front and behind. I like, I like being in a line. I don't know what it is about it. But number two, I love the excitement of traveling and I love the, little taste you can get around places. And so even when I'm in an airport that I don't care for, I think that there's something kind of fun about that. And I do find that you can see humanity at its best and worst when you're inside of an airport, right? So like here you are on your way back home, and you've been away long enough. And it's not just the plane landing. It's you had that moment, and that moment is really what brought you back into the city, right?
Yeah. It was getting out of the cab. Yeah, right before going home. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I think that's just like when I would fly back to Chicago when I lived there, it wasn't landing at O'Hare. In fact, I felt like now I've got an entire extra journey ahead of me. And oh, wait, the blue line's under construction right now. Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to, traipse my way up to a neighborhood I've never been in and wait for a bus that's never going to come. And, all that kind of fun stuff in there. And that, it's the same thing with Fargo, right? So when you land in Fargo, North Dakota, the airport is the place, like you are instantly in Fargo. In fact, before you even get off the plane, Fargo will seep into what's coming for things like, ladies and gentlemen, I know we just landed. Unfortunately, the 3 planes currently connected to jetways are frozen to the jetways. And so we're going to have to wait until the mechanic gets up. Don't worry, his cousin Bob called him and he should be here shortly. He's just finishing up a Bison game right now, and he'll get these guys unstuck. He's going to hook his F-150 up to the rear wheels of that Delta plane over there and just kind of tug them loose a little bit. So while we're waiting, hey, here's a fact. It's negative 18 degrees in Fargo right now, but it actually feels like negative 60.
And they walk up and down the aisle and they're like, anyone want some bars? We got some bars.
I want some bars. You like that?
Yeah, I mean, everything you just explained, I felt in my flights in and out of Fargo. But the funniest thing was the first time, like as soon as we landed, as soon as we got in, we got our rental car, and we were, we didn't even know how far away we were staying. We put it in the GPS. It was a 10-minute drive to where we were staying from the airport, and that's like so close compared to everywhere else. And I don't think there were any turns. Like I remember pulling out of the airport and there was maybe one turn. I was like, how did we, it was amazing. I don't know. It was just, and we went through like, what I later found out was NDSU's like farm campus and everything, but it was just one straight shot right in. And this is how I knew it was a college town right away. As we were driving through in August, we saw a bunch of kids playing beer pong out in the street.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, we have arrived.
Well, and fast fact too, I believe that we exist in a twilight zone, because anytime I've ever needed to be like, oh, I don't know if I know where Timberline Parkway is in Fargo, it is 10 minutes to anywhere. Like you're never more than 10 minutes away from your destination in Fargo. And so we're some kind of weird anomaly like that.
Yeah. It made driving so easy. I loved driving in Fargo, to be honest.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And just, I should have asked this a lot earlier, but what did your wife teach at Concordia?
Oh, she taught devising. So it's a theater course. And then she did private acting coaching lessons with the students in the theater department. And she directed their production of Into the Woods.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So are you guys, are you a theater heavy household? Like you guys go out and see shows all the time?
As often as we can. Yeah. We saw a Theater B show. We saw Cake while we were in Fargo. And yeah, we try to see theater as often as we can. We saw a Broadway show right before COVID hit, like the weekend before. We saw Jagged Little Pill.
Oh, how was it?
It was okay. Like it was, it was a cool jukebox musical. The music was awesome. I loved, listening to all the Alanis Morissette music, but we were critical of it and enjoyed it at the same time.
So here's the thing I think of, because I've listened to the whole cast recording for Jagged Little Pill, and it's this. There's a very niche audience who has been asking for the last 25 years to see a musical adaptation of Alanis Morissette's music, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't pull me in. It's not like the story to me isn't good enough to get me fully invested the way Mamma Mia captured the zeitgeist of like mothers and daughters. And even if, neither of them were an ABBA fan, or, the daughter had never even heard anything other than Dancing Queen, they can get sucked in by this story of three dads. And I think that's the part that was missing to me, right? Like it was the part of like, okay, well, I don't fully understand who your core audience is, who is going to see this and then tell more people to go see it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
I have friends who just saw Mrs. Doubtfire right before it had to take a pause again.
Yeah.
And they said, this is the conversation that happens at the bar and in the restroom at intermission. It's hilarious, but it's no Robin Williams. And I think when you take a role that's so iconic like that, it's tough. And I think I think we saw it again too, where there was the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory one, but everyone is like, well, it's the songs that I love, but it's not really the same Willy Wonka that I love. And we're on dangerous ground where we're adapting anything we think was popular at one point into a stage musical. I don't know that everything necessarily fits.
I completely agree. I think some of the, most I don't know. I mean, people now I think have a different take on Hamilton, right? But when it came out, like, it really was profound. And yes, of course, it's based on a book and based on, a true story. But it really did something very different that I think, I mean, it was just, it was awesome for a reason. And I think there are a lot of shows that are super original that go to Broadway and just don't get the same love because they're not based on something else. And that's really sad.
One of my favorite Broadway shows of all time that I am just shocked is not done by every single high school imaginable is I'm a big fan of Dr. Seuss. And I think that Seussical, the musical, hits every note, no pun intended, that you want with something like that. And when that came out, it kind of gets buried, right? Because it comes out right around the same time as The Producers hits Broadway, and people are like, oh, Broadway is no longer the Music Man and My Fair Lady. It's this, bawdy, ballsy, edgy kind of stuff. And at that point, edgy was a musical number by Adolf Hitler. And look at where we are today. We've certainly changed the way people think about going. It's not just the Phantom of the Opera anymore.
Yeah, I think one of the weirdest little quirky things that happened on Broadway, in the years when we were growing up ish, is that Avenue Q beat Wicked for Best Musical.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, the both shows are amazing, but I just think people often forget that because Wicked's been on Broadway for, 500 years. But it's just an interesting little quirk in history.
Yeah, and it also beat Taboo that same year, which I thought was the most pretentious musical I've ever seen in my entire life. Boy George needn't have bothered, in my opinion.
Wow.
Okay, I have a question for the both of you. You can each answer individually.
Sure.
If a wealthy benefactor who money was not an object to came to each of you individually and said, Joey or JJ, I'm going to give you the budget you need to develop a the musical of your dreams. What would you be trying to adapt into a musical? If you'd be adapting something else, or even if it was something brand new.
So it's an adaptation of something?
Well, I mean, you answer the question how you want, but I'm really basically wealthy benefactor comes to you. Money's not an object. I want you to develop a musical. Here's your budget. What are you making?
Well, I mean, what I would do is obviously not obviously, but I know a lot of musical writers and artists who are, up and coming. And I think I would turn it over to them, especially to hear from voices that are underrepresented on Broadway and, just to bring new writers into the fold and new voices to Broadway. That's probably what I would do. But we were talking about Jagged Little Pill. And I think if I had to adapt something into like a jukebox musical, I'd want to see an adaptation of the Killer's Hot Fuss album on stage. Like I've always imagined what that would be because those stories are so, like, those songs are so telegraphic. So I sort of copping out and giving you two answers, but
that's fine.
Yeah.
My answer, I mean, Joey has this really profound and modern idea of making sure that all the voices are heard, but I just would like to see a Jim Henson adaptation of A Muppet Christmas Carol on stage that isn't people in giant Muppet costumes, but finding a creative way to include all those characters and human actors on the same stage.
Oh, that is cool. That would be really cool.
There's a place called the Victory Theater who did the second ever stage adaptation of a television special that Jim Henson did called Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And the stage adaptation is bonkers because you have people who are like anthropomorphic foxes, but then also just larger than would be on broadcast television versions of like Jim Henson's Muppets, because they're all animals, right? So they're anthropomorphic animals who run this town. And so there's some that's just the people in costumes, and there's other ones that is real action puppetry. It is bonkers good. And I think if you can do that, you could do a Muppet Christmas Carol and then just coast for the next 25 years because it's been proven that people love that music. And I think fleshing that out even more is wonderful. And you even have some full size puppets already. So like think of the Ghost of Christmas Present is already a full scale like puppet. And so I think that'd be awesome.
It would be awesome. I'll go one extra for that, right? So that could run every holiday season from like the end of, October, but then do Muppet Treasure Island the rest of the year.
And you know what? If you want to have 2 dark nights a week, just put the Electric Mayhem on stage.
Oh, 100%.
And because there have been like they've headlined, well, not headlined, but they've been an act at like 4 festivals now where, they do things outside of just the songs that they've done in like Muppet movies. And I'm like, I think that to me, there's some nostalgia dollars that people would pay hefty amounts to see Muppet Treasure Island, the Electric Mayhem, to go, even like what if Fozzie hosted a stand-up set once a month where you could come and he would introduce like Patton Oswalt, right? But Fozzie would be there at the very beginning. I think people would go crazy for it. And
like Fozzie's hosting.
Just open up the Muppet Theater. Yeah. What?
Yeah.
You know what? You're right, Joe. That is what the idea is let's just open the Muppet Theater and get it done.
I love it.
Oh, good. Joey, this has been so much fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we hit everything from Pittsburgh to cheesesteaks to Broadway. This is one of my favorite episodes in recent memory. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. While we were recording this episode, I am also building a die-cast model of the Jeep Wrangler from Jurassic Park.